The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Man from Lang. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, I am reviewing the Rogue cards in Dark Side of the Moon, the third Mythos pack in the Dream Eater cycle. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel for their tremendous support and Cole Monroe Chitty for his fantastic rendition of A Man from Lang. The Arkham Horror LCG community is amazing, and these people have gone above and beyond to bring you content like these reviews. If you'd like to become a patron to support the channel's goals and see your name in lights, follow the link down below, sign up for a tier, and claim your rewards. That would be awesome. Without further ado, let's get started. The first Rogue card in the pack is 3 Aces. It's a skill that costs 1 experience point. It has a wild skill icon and the myriad keyword. It has the following game text. If you commit 3 copies of 3 Aces to a skill test, that test automatically succeeds. Do not reveal Chaos tokens from the Chaos bag. Then draw 3 cards and gain 3 resources, max once per test. Honestly, I've had mixed feelings about 3 Aces from the moment I saw it. On the one hand, the effect is undeniably powerful. Automatically succeeding on a skill test, drawing 3 cards and gaining 3 resources is great, especially if you're playing on hard or expert difficulty. Automatically succeeding on a clutch skill test when the odds are stacked against you has the potential to swing a game in your favor, and drawing 3 cards and gaining 3 resources without necessarily taking an action helps you maintain your tempo. On the other hand, you need access to all 3 copies of 3 Aces before the card does anything. Otherwise, you've paid 1 experience point for 3 cards with 1 wild skill icon each, which is underwhelming to say the least. Besides, I really don't like the fact that the first 2 copies of 3 Aces are basically dead draws until you draw that 3rd copy. If I'm in a tight spot and I'm drawing cards in the hope of finding an answer, 3 Aces is not the card I want to see, unless of course it's that 3rd copy. And if 1 copy of 3 Aces happens to get discarded before you collect all 3, say because you're playing the Dunwich Legacy campaign, which is chock full of treacheries that discard cards from your hand and the top of your draw deck, then you're stuck with 2 mediocre cards. That would suck. It's also worth noting that you're tying up 3 card slots to automatically succeed on what amounts to 1 skill test, unless of course you're able to draw through your deck or shuffle your discard pile back into your deck after you trigger the combination. I'm not convinced that it's worth it for just 1 test, unless of course you're playing on hard or expert difficulty where that automatic success is very important. Drawing 3 copies of 3 Aces the old-fashioned way in a typical Rogue deck is going to be extremely challenging and woefully inconsistent, since there are very few options to draw extra cards in the Rogue class. At the beginning of the campaign, your options are limited to Henry Wan from The Wages of Sin, Lucky Cigarette Case from Threads of Fate, Pickpocketing from the Core Set, and Winifred Habermock, the Rogue who will be released in the Investigator Starter Deck product in August. Unfortunately, Henry Wan is simply an awful card, while Lucky Cigarette Case, Pickpocketing, and Winifred Habermock require you to jump through certain hoops before you get that extra draw. Your options don't get that much better once you've earned a few experience points. The only Rogue card that lets you draw a pile of extra cards is All In, a Rogue skill from Shattered Aeons. However, it comes with its own baggage since it costs 5 experience points and it requires you to succeed by X to draw X cards to a maximum of 5. If you've got your heart set on playing 3 Aces, you need a way to draw all 3 copies quickly and efficiently. Fortunately, there are 2 cards in this pack that can help. If you're playing an Investigator with access to the Rogue and Seeker card pools, such as Amanda Sharp and Trish Scarborough, the Seeker and Rogue Investigators who will be released in the Innsmouth Conspiracy Deluxe expansion, then you can play Practice Makes Perfect. 3 Aces has the Practice trait, so you can use Practice Makes Perfect to fetch a copy of it from the top 9 cards of your draw deck. Just make sure you've got the other 2 copies of 3 Aces in your hand before you do this, though, or you won't be able to pull off the combination. Rogues and off-class rogues who lack access to the Seeker card pool can pull off a similar trick with Daredevil Zero, a rogue skill from the Winifred Habermock Investigator starter deck, or Daredevil 2 from Point of No Return. As with Practice Makes Perfect, commit Daredevil before you commit 3 Aces, because there is a chance it won't find that 3rd copy of 3 Aces in your deck. The other option in this pack is Lucid Dreaming, a neutral event. If you've got at least one copy of 3 Aces in your hand, Lucid Dreaming will fetch you another copy of it. Perhaps the best option right now to leverage 3 Aces is to play Mandy Thompson, the Secret Investigator from the Dream Eaters Deluxe expansion. If Mandy picks Rogue as her secondary class choice, she can purchase 3 Aces. Mandy also has the option of playing a 40 or 50 card deck, which alleviates the deck slot issues I mentioned earlier. When Mandy searches her draw deck, her response lets her resolve one additional target of the search. If Mandy plays Lucid Dreaming, she can grab 2 copies of 3 Aces, quickly assembling the combination. If you go this route, make sure you've dealt with Mandy's signature weakness, Shocking Discovery, first, otherwise the search will be cancelled. If Mandy doesn't want to spend the 2 experience points on Lucid Dreaming, she can pull off a similar trick with a card like Mr. Rook from Wages of Sin. It's also worth noting that Mandy can use Practice Makes Perfect if she has one or two copies of 3 Aces in her hand to grab 1 and or 2 other copies and commit them to a skill test. As I mentioned at the top of the review, I'm not convinced that 3 Aces is worth the effort for many investigators. While the combination is powerful, it's going to be inconsistent unless you've got a reliable way to draw all 3 copies in a timely fashion. Drawing only 1 or 2 copies of 3 Aces just doesn't cut it, since they don't do all that much individually. If you're gunning for the combination, you can't really commit them to skill tests either, which is a big drawback in my book. Unfortunately, rogues don't have that many ways to draw extra cards without spending actions, so there is a chance you'll end up drawing only 1 or 2 copies of 3 Aces, which is not ideal. Worst case, 1 copy gets discarded to a treachery, and then you're left with 2 mediocre cards in your deck. The 3 notable exceptions here are Amanda Sharp, Trish Scarborough, and Mandy Thompson, all of whom have access to the draw and tutors in the secret card pool. If you're not playing Amanda, Mandy, or Trish, then Lucid Dreaming is probably your best bet. Daredevil is another option, although much like Practice Makes Perfect, there is no guarantee you'll pull that 3rd copy of 3 Aces. The second rogue card in the pack is Burglary 2, an upgrade for Burglary 0 from the core set. It's a 1-cost asset that costs 2 experience points. It has 2 intellect skill icons and the talent and illicit traits. As an action, you may exhaust Burglary to investigate. If you succeed, instead of discovering clues, gain 2 resources, plus 1 additional resource for each point you succeed by, to a maximum of plus 3 resources. Burglary 0 is a bad card that embodies a lot of the design flaws that I have railed against since I started doing card reviews in the Dunwich Legacy cycle. Burglary takes an action to play, an action to trigger, and it forces you to pass a skill test before you generate a single resource with it. Most investigators who may play this card are painfully average in the intellect department, so passing the skill test at a typical 3-shroud location likely means committing more cards and or resources to the endeavor, which is a losing proposition all around. During its heyday at the beginning of the Dunwich Legacy cycle, Burglary saw some play in Skids O'Toole, who could spend the resources generated by Burglary to take an additional action, mitigating the downside of the card somewhat. Burglary also saw play in Rex Murphy, who could trigger his response while investigating with Burglary to gain 3 resources and a clue. However, Burglary's moment in the sun was brief. Lone Wolf, a rogue asset that rewards you with a resource each turn for doing next to nothing, came out in Blood on the Altar. It was followed by a legion of other rogue cards, such as Another Day, Another Dollar, Watch This, Easy Mark, and Gregory Gree, that have made it ridiculously easy to generate resources without Burglary's overhead. There are so many great resource generation options in the rogue card pool that Burglary has been relegated to the binder, which makes it all the more surprising that designer Matt Newman decided to revisit it at all and create Burglary 2. It's not like rogue players were saying, "Do you know what this class really needs to succeed? A better version of Burglary." Nope, rogue players basically said, "Burglary sucks, let's move on." Burglary 2 is an improvement on Burglary 0, but not by much. It has 2 intellect skill icons rather than 1, which is fine, albeit pretty unspectacular. It has the potential to generate 2 more resources than Burglary 0 if you succeed by 3 during an investigate action. Succeeding by 3 on a skill test is a big ask, even for the intellectually superior investigator like Finn Edwards. At a 3-shroud location, you would need to have an intellect skill value of 8 or so to succeed by 3 with any consistency. Many Fin decks pack Lola Santiago from Heart of the Elders, which helps, but he will still need to commit additional cards and or resources to make up the difference. If you commit resources to cover the gap, you'll net 3 resources, which is basically the same amount as Burglary 0. That begs the question, what the hell is the point? The bizarre thing about Burglary 2 is that it has the potential to be even slightly worse than its level 0 counterpart unless you succeed by at least 1 on the intellect skill test. Frankly, I can't think of another upgrade that has the potential to be worse than its level 0 counterpart. Would Burglary 3 have been busted if it generated 3 resources with the potential to generate an additional 3 for a total of 6? I doubt it. Burglary 0 is a bad card. Players don't use it because there are far better alternatives. Burglary 2 is an improvement, but it's still bad. In fact, it reminds me a lot of Healing Words, the mystic asset that was released in 1,000 Shapes of Horror. While I can understand the design process behind both cards, nobody was clamoring for either of these cards to be released. At least Healing Words has the potential to see some play if the right investigator is released down the road. Sadly, I don't think you can say the same thing about Burglary 2. That's going to do it for my review of the rogue cards in Dark Side of the Moon. This is a disappointing pack for rogue investigators. If I put a card in my deck, then I expect it to make an immediate impact, whether I decide to play it or commit it to a skill test. That's not necessarily the case with 3 aces, which forces you to play the waiting game while you assemble the combination, and rogues aren't exactly known for drawing cards. Automatically succeeding on a skill test, drawing cards and generating resources is great, but you get to do it only once under most circumstances, and if you don't pull off the combination for whatever reason, you're basically stuck with 3 blank cards with 1 wild icon. Your best bet is to play it in Mandy, since she can collect all 3 copies easier than most investigators. Trish might like it too, although we don't really know all that much about her other than the fact that she is a rogue seeker. As for Burglary 2, well, it's a bad upgrade for a bad card that probably shouldn't be in your deck in the first place. Rogues have so many great options to generate resources without spending actions or relying on their average intellect that they don't need to waste their time with Burglary 2. The real crime here is that this card was printed at all. That's going to do it for this review. If you enjoyed this content, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Head over to patreon.com to sign up to become a patron of the channel. That would be awesome. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromling@gmail.com. I am also on Twitter at manfromling. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.